From people-pleasing to self-pleasing, reclaiming your time. Hello, and welcome back to Blueprint of You, the podcast where we explore how small, intentional changes can help you grow into your best self. I am your host, and today's episode is one that hits home for many of us. We're talking about people-pleasing, what it really is, how it drains your energy, and most importantly, how you can transform it into self-love by setting healthy boundaries. Think about the last time you agreed to something you didn't want to do. Maybe you stayed late at work, helped a friend when you were already exhausted, or said yes to a project that overwhelmed you. You might have felt uneasy, but convinced yourself it was the right thing to do. After all, isn't helping others what makes you a good person? But here's the question we rarely ask. What about helping yourself? People-pleasing often masquerades as kindness, but it's rooted in fear. Fear of rejection, fear of conflict, and fear of being seen as selfish. Yet, true kindness is not about abandoning yourself to serve others. It's about balance, compassion, and having the courage to say no when something doesn't align with your values or well-being. As Brené Brown beautifully said, daring to set boundaries is about having the courage to love ourselves, even when we risk disappointing others. I know how hard that can be. Trust me, I've been there. The weight of always being the yes person can feel like carrying an invisible burden, one that slowly drains your energy and leaves you feeling empty. But here's the good news. You don't have to stay stuck in that cycle. Today, we're going to explore why people-pleasing happens, the real costs it brings to your mental and emotional health, and how you can reclaim your time and energy by setting healthy boundaries. By the end of this episode, you'll have actionable tools to help you step into your authentic self without guilt or fear. So, if you're ready to stop living for others and start living for yourself, let's dive in. Understanding people-pleasing and its roots. People-pleasing is not just about being kind or helpful. It's deeper and more complex. It's about seeking validation, avoiding conflict, and sometimes even trying to control how others feel about us. Dr. Harriet Breaker, in her book The Disease to Please, describes people-pleasing as a compulsive disorder, where the need to be liked outweighs the desire to be authentic. Let's take a closer look at where this behavior comes from. It often starts in childhood. Maybe you were praised for being a good child when you were quiet, compliant, or helpful. Over time, you learned that your worth was tied to how much you could do for others. This isn't uncommon. Many of us internalize these lessons early on. A study published in Psychology Today suggests that people-pleasing behaviors can be a result of parental expectations or social conditioning, where we believe that our value is determined by how much we give. But it's not just personal upbringing. Cultural factors play a role too. In many cultures, especially those that value collectivism, putting others first is seen as a virtue. While there's beauty in community care, it can sometimes be taken to an extreme where personal boundaries are seen as selfish. But as Brené Brown reminds us, compassionate people ask for what they need. They say no when they need to, and when they say yes, they mean it. They are compassionate because their boundaries keep them out of resentment. Understanding why you've become a people pleaser is the first step toward change. It's not a flaw. It's a coping mechanism you've developed over time to feel safe and accepted. But what worked in the past might no longer be serving you now. The high cost of people pleasing. People-pleasing comes with hidden costs that often go unnoticed until it's too late. One of the most significant is burnout. Constantly putting others' needs before your own drains your energy, leaving little for yourself. A report from the Mayo Clinic highlights that poor boundaries are directly linked to increased levels of anxiety and stress. When you feel responsible for other people's emotions or problems, you carry an emotional load that isn't yours to bear. Beyond burnout, there's another cost: the erosion of your identity. Every time you say yes when you want to say no, you chip away at your sense of self. You might start to feel like you're living someone else's life, losing sight of your own dreams and desires. This is what psychologist Dr. Susan Newman calls the identity trap of people-pleasing. She explains that over time, people who continually suppress their needs in favor of others can experience diminished self-esteem, a feeling of invisibility, and even depression. And let's not forget the impact on relationships. Ironically, people-pleasing can lead to resentment. toward others and toward yourself. Have you ever felt bitter after helping someone, wondering why they never reciprocated? That bitterness is a sign that a boundary has been crossed. A study published in the Journal of Behavioral Science found that those who habitually people please often feel unappreciated, leading to strained relationships and emotional exhaustion. Here's the thing: healthy relationships thrive on mutual respect. When you're constantly accommodating others at the expense of your own needs, the dynamic becomes unbalanced, and the relationship suffers. Shifting from people-pleasing to self-love. Now that we understand the roots and costs of people-pleasing, how do we break free? The key is setting boundaries, something that can feel incredibly uncomfortable at first, but is essential for reclaiming your time and energy. 1. Start with small steps. Begin by practicing soft no's. For example, if someone asks you to do something that you don't want to, say, "I'd love to help, but I'm not available right now." This gives you a chance to say no without feeling harsh or guilty. Psychologist Dr. Dana Gionta recommends practicing this in low-stakes situations to build confidence. 2. Use the pause technique. Instead of immediately saying yes to a request, pause and say, "Let me think about it." This gives you time to evaluate whether the request aligns with your priorities. According to a study in the Journal of Personal Boundaries, this technique reduces impulsive agreements and leads to healthier decision-making. 3. Assertive communication boundaries don't need to be aggressive to be effective. A simple, "I can't do that, but thank you for thinking of me," is enough. Remember, no is a complete sentence. Assertiveness is a skill that takes time, but it will empower you to protect your energy without feeling guilty. Embracing your authentic self. As you begin to set boundaries, you'll notice something powerful. You'll start to reconnect with your authentic self. You'll stop living for others and begin to live for yourself. Thank you for listening to Blueprint of You. You'll have more time for the things that truly matter to you. Stay present, and your relationships will improve as a result. Dr. Joel Streed from the Mayo Clinic emphasizes that setting boundaries isn't about shutting people out. It's about defining where your responsibility ends and theirs begins. When you set boundaries, you model self-respect and invite others to do the same. It may feel uncomfortable at first, especially if you've been a people-pleaser for years. But remember, discomfort is a sign of growth. The more you practice, the easier it becomes. Eventually, setting boundaries will feel natural, and the resentment you once felt will fade away. Thank you for joining me today on Blueprint of You. Remember, setting boundaries is not about being selfish. It's about self-respect. By saying no to what doesn't serve you, you're saying yes to a life of authenticity and joy. If this episode resonated with you, please share it with someone who might need to hear it. And as always, keep taking those small steps toward becoming 1% better every day. Until next time, take care of yourself. You deserve it.